In the late 19th century, something just unprecedented happened. An entire continent, huge and incredibly diverse, got carved up and claimed by foreign powers in, like, a single generation. It's a wild story, so let's dive into this incredible and intense period of history known as the Scramble for Africa.
So, let's set the scene. Picture this. It's 1870. For a long, long time, European powers kind of just stuck to the African coastline. You know, they had their little trading posts here and there, but the massive interior, it was basically a mystery to them, partly because of things like malaria, which was just brutal. So at this point, they only controlled about 10% of the whole continent.
Okay, now let's jump forward. It's just over 40 years later, right before World War I. That tiny 10%, it's exploded to nearly 90%. I mean, think about that. Almost an entire continent redrawn, claimed, and colonized in what feels like the blink of an eye. The speed and the scale of it all, it's just staggering. And that's what historians call the Scramble for Africa. It was this frantic, super competitive rush where you had 7 major European nations just invading, conquering, and splitting up the continent for themselves. Just look at this. It gives you a really clear snapshot of what happened. You've got the big players right here. The UK, they controlled a huge chunk from Egypt all the way down to South Africa. France, they grabbed these massive areas in the northwest. And get this, even a small country like Belgium ended up with the gigantic Congo Free State. The continent was literally sliced up, with almost zero thought for the people who actually lived there. So you gotta ask, right? What was the spark? What lit the fuse for this massive explosion of imperial ambition? Why did everyone suddenly rush in all at once? Well, it turns out there were a few key things all happening at the exact same time.
Okay, so you've got a few big drivers fueling this whole thing. First up, economics. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, creating this huge, hungry demand for raw materials. Then you've got strategic rivalry. It was like a giant geopolitical chess match. If Britain made a move, France felt like it had to make one too. And then there's just plain old national prestige. Back in the 19th century, having a huge empire was the ultimate status symbol, you know? It showed you were a world power. And finally, and this is a big one, technology. Suddenly, things like steamships, better guns, and medicine like quinine to fight malaria, they made conquering the interior not just possible, but way easier than ever before.
So when you hear about the Scramble, it's easy to think of it as just this story of complete, absolute European domination, right? An entire continent just overwhelmed. But is that really the whole story? Was the conquest actually total? Well, the answer is not quite. In the middle of this almost total colonization, 2 nations actually managed to hold on to their independence. One was Liberia, which was founded by freed American slaves and was kind of seen as being under U.S. protection. But the other one is Ethiopia, and Ethiopia fought for its freedom against a modern European army and won. So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did they do it? How did Ethiopia succeed when so many others failed? The answer, well, it goes way, way back into its unique and ancient history. See, this wasn't some brand new state. This was an old, powerful empire with incredibly deep roots. Yeah, Ethiopia's story doesn't just start in the 1800s. We're talking way back, as far back as the 4th century, with the Kingdom of Aksum, which was a major world power. For hundreds and hundreds of years, powerful dynasties ruled, building this really strong sense of history and identity. So by the time Emperor Menelik II came to power, he wasn't starting from scratch. He was building on this incredible legacy of imperial rule. And look at this incredible stela from Aksum. It's a powerful, physical reminder of that very history. This wasn't some territory that was just discovered by Europeans. No way. This was an ancient civilization that had been a major player on the world stage for centuries. And that deep, deep history, it created this amazing sense of pride and unity among its people. And another huge piece of the puzzle was religion. It was a seriously powerful unifying force. Ethiopia developed its very own unique form of Christianity, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which is tied to these amazing legends of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. This wasn't just religion, it was a core part of their cultural and national identity that really bound everyone together.
Now, that's not to say Ethiopia was all one homogeneous group. Not at all. It was, and still is, a very diverse, multi-ethnic empire. You've got the Oromo and Amhara as the largest groups, among many others. But, and this is key, under a really strong leader like Emperor Menelik II, all that diversity was harnessed together into one formidable, unified force. And that unified force was about to be put to the ultimate test. Italy, who was kind of a latecomer to the whole scramble for Africa, set its sights on Ethiopia. And they pretty much assumed it would be an easy win, just like so many other conquests. Oh, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. Okay, so this is the moment. 1896, the Battle of Adwa. Emperor Menelik's massive, well-armed army meets the invading Italians. And the result? A stunning, absolutely decisive victory for Ethiopia. This sent shockwaves across the entire world. An African army had just totally defeated a modern European military power. That victory at Adwa, it cemented Ethiopia's independence and became this legendary moment in their history. And even today, it's this huge source of national pride. It's a symbol of resistance, a powerful reminder of the country's strength. So that brings us to the legacy of this whole era, right? The scramble for Africa left some deep, lasting scars on the continent. But even for Ethiopia, the victor, the story isn't simple. It has its own complex imperial legacy to deal with. For most of Africa, you can literally see the legacy on the map. Look at those straight lines. Those are the arbitrary borders, drawn by Europeans in places like Berlin, that just sliced right through ethnic and cultural groups. And those decisions created tensions that many African nations are still dealing with today. But Ethiopia's story is different, remember? Its borders weren't drawn by Europe. They were drawn by its own emperors, like Menelik II, as they expanded their empire. Now, for some, like the Amhara, this was a proud moment, the unification of a great nation. But for other groups who were conquered during this expansion, like the Oromo and Somalis, well, to them, it felt a lot like colonialism, just from a different source. In that really complex internal history, it directly shapes the Ethiopia we see today. In 1995, the whole country was reorganized under the system called ethnic federalism. The basic idea was to give different ethnic groups more power and autonomy in their own regions. It was a direct response to this long history of very centralized rule that was often dominated by one group. And that really leaves us with a big final thought, doesn't it? The scramble for Africa is this powerful lesson in how lines drawn on a map more than 100 years ago can have consequences that echo for generations. But the story of Ethiopia, it adds this whole other layer of complexity. It reminds us that the dynamics of empire, power, and identity are never, ever simple. And it forces us all to ask a really important question. How do the borders of the past, no matter who drew them, continue to define our world and our futures today?